All right, so what I am so excited about is something that I know I was brought to this work I was supposed to do this because I also come from a very diverse background. I have multicultural background as well as multi-faith. I don't practice a specific religion. I am not indoctrinated in that way. However, I would call myself spiritually fluid, which I will go into more in a bit. So the title is Celebrating Love Beyond Boundaries, Navigating Diversity as an Officiant, which I think is so important today, especially with the climate of things. So I love this picture because to me, this shows that we're all working towards, being here together, and how is that we can all bring more love to the world as with our differences and as well as with the things that bring us together. I named my business years ago when I started about 13, 14 years ago, Common Ground Ceremonies, because to me, it's love that brings all of us together. And we can't look at any difference when we're in a wedding situation that we know that it's actually love that brought us to that space. So my interfaith journey. So I'm a native New Yorker. Are there any native New Yorkers here? Yay! Oh my gosh, this is great. Okay, so born and raised, I have a Jewish mom. My father is a Black Muslim. My stepfather who raised me was a Catholic Puerto Rican. Yeah, pretty much. And so the good news is that all of them raised me with love. And honestly, I'll probably say love a million times, but really, I was raised with the understanding that when I watched something like Sesame Street, that's, my generation, I looked at all of those different characters as things that were representing that we're all different. However, we can all live together. And I didn't know that was a naive thought at the time growing up, because all my friends were mixed and we were from hippie, musician families. I actually officiate many weddings in the very spot that my parents met, which is at Washington Square Park at the fountain. Pretty crazy. Yeah, so actually recently I did, and every time I cry because I think about what that really means, is like, where do we come from? Who are we? And our story has so much to do with what brought us to this work, because it's one thing to get married, but it's a whole other thing to look at, you're building a family, right? You're bringing families together. And sometimes that can be a big responsibility, even if we're only spending that one sacred moment with that couple. We're embedded in their memory as the person that held that space. And so oftentimes when we're brought into these multicultural scenarios or these mixed scenarios or what have you, especially in New York City, with the internet, between all the dating sites, so many of my couples have met online, but one will be in Germany and the other one will be here, or, a lot of them might not even speak the same language all the time. And so there's that challenge as well. So that's part of why I'm excited to be here talking about this, because many of us will encounter it. And we have biases, all of us, whether it's a bias for a culture or just a bias for something that we were raised with that we believe. So I think look at yourself and look at what your thoughts are on, what if this couple were to approach me? Would I be comfortable officiating a ceremony for them? Is the family going to look at me and be like, well, why did you pick that person? They look nothing like us. Or, I've had the whole thing happen. And honestly, I'm at the point in my life where I'm going to come as who I am. And if you accept me for who I am, great. And if you don't, great. However, I'm here for the couple, and I worked with them. I spent time with them. So that's who, so 'cause sometimes family members will be like wanting to ask us a million questions. So before I rant on, I will. I showed this photo because in 2000. For many years, there was this logo used to be a circle, and I would see it everywhere. Growing up in New York City, I would see the symbol, and I'm like, why do I feel so drawn? And I would see all the different faiths, and because, like I told you, my background, I'm from like the whole thing. I was like, well, when I become a mom, what am I going to tell my kids what we are? Like, what if they ask me? So I think the reason why this symbol kept showing up for me throughout like probably a good 10 years was there was a program that was started back in 1989 by a rabbi named Rabbi Gelberman, 81, sorry, Rabbi Gelberman, Rabbi Joseph Gelberman. And as a child, he had a few nudges that he was supposed to bring a new vision to the world. And part of that vision was that we are all connected and that there should be clergy or something in this world that holds space for people no matter what they believe, no matter where they come from. And so he created this school in New York City. He was originally from Hungary, and he had met Swami Satchidananda, who's like 6'4", rabbi's like this tall. And he said when he first met Swami Satchidananda, he sees this guy like in all white with this long white beard walking towards him, and he said he looked like his dad. And he was like, oh my gosh, my father is walking towards me. Meanwhile, it was this beautiful yogi from India who actually was responsible for bringing a lot of yoga consciousness to the United States. They became instant friends. There's many YouTube videos of the two of them. I think it's called The Rabbi and the Swami online of their interaction. Beautiful. And so they created the new seminary for interfaith studies. I am now, which I can't believe, I am now the associate director. So I stand on the shoulders of very beautiful visionaries, people that saw that our world, look at this room. I mean, we're all from different places, different cultures, different ideas, yet here we are able to sit in this space and learn something so that we can be better as individuals and we can be better for the future families that, we're here to support. So in terms of the new seminary, I just came back from the Parliament of the World's Religions, which was 10,000 people. They gather every 4 or 5 years in a different place all over the world. And I just was blown away by the beauty of how everyone was so respectful. And I thought I was going to walk into all these like religious, scenarios, but actually it was all about human rights. And I'm a human rights advocate. I've always, believed that, what's most important is that we are represented in especially in situations like what's happening now, where there's such a divisive narrative happening in the media. And I don't have to go through this. We all know what's going on. So I feel that it's my role and duty as a minister and as a person that is a leader in this realm to be a human rights advocate. If you have questions about it, I can go into it more another time. So let's move on. So multiculturalism. So here I am with a couple. It's so funny. She found me because we have the same background and she grew up in the same neighborhood. She got so excited. She's like, I'm Jewish and he's African and she's mixed. So we did a beautiful chuppah. And they also, I think there's a photo here of them jumping the broom at the end of the ceremony. But I've just been blessed to meet and have so many situations like this where we find the common ground. We find how to celebrate. Sometimes it's just in ritual, not even in words. Sometimes it's just by simply having these things. And it's an education for all of us. It's sometimes even a beautiful education for the other family. Oh, we didn't realize that it meant that. Or, oh my gosh, that's a beautiful symbol. And a lot of times through these weddings and through these scenarios that we grow and that we become better as the clergy or as the officiant, as the celebrant. And so I liked this quote: multiculturalism recognizes that diversity is a strength, not a threat. It fosters a sense of belonging and social cohesion by promoting acceptance, understanding, and equal opportunities for individuals of all cultural backgrounds. So I want to speak a little bit about spiritual fluidity, because you will definitely, with this generation, you will definitely run into a lot of people that have either been raised religious, like even last night I heard the term recovering Catholic. That's a very common term now. Just raised, maybe some of them raised very religious and they don't really resonate with it right now at this stage. I think all of us in our early 20s, like right out of college, we start to question our identity. You know, it's our away from our core root family system. So I think it's when we're marrying couples that are at that age or may have met in college, a lot of times they're like, but we don't recognize ourselves as that faith. So what do we do in these situations when we're getting married? We don't want to offend our family, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like us. And my response to that is, this is your ceremony and this is your life, that this is your first step into this next chapter. So let's figure that out. So sometimes it takes some dialogue, and sometimes they do come around to wanting to add a prayer or have maybe that person they're worried about offending, they'll have them come up and do the prayer. There's ways to massage and figure out how to include everyone and also make it feel like it's about the couple, that that we're all here to support this couple's journey. So there's the term SBNR, which is spiritual but not religious. So we can relate to I would say that's me in many respects. I respect all of the faiths, and I respect that all of us have a center point that we're all working towards, and we may have to just take different highways to get there, and that's how I look at it. And when you're spiritual but not religious, sometimes a couple with that scenario, they might want to have a Buddhist reading, they might want to have a hand fasting because they thought it was cool, they saw it in Braveheart, seriously, so a lot of times the rituals that to do, I try to be as respectful to that faith, and sometimes I'll have to say, well, I understand you want to do that. Again, like I stood up here and I played my drum as my lakota, but I don't appropriate. Like I want that to be understood that I was adopted and I respect it, and I know it's my medicine. So again, with the family scenario, it's good to just do the research, make sure that as that person appointed to hold that sacred space, that you know your stuff. And you may have to do some extra homework on, what would be appropriate and what they might be able to create their own version of that very same ceremony. And then a lot of people that are spiritual but not religious, they believe in an internal spiritual space, but may not be comfortable with a god or goddess or any type of deity above that's overruling. Also very comfortable with spiritual language. So I often ask, so if you are spiritual but not religious, where does God fit in? Is God okay? If not, then is bless. Words like that may trigger people depending on whether they're coming from it, they chose that because of trauma. We don't know. So sometimes, in these most important decisions, especially a wedding, that's when all your stuff can come up. Then also, they may, like I said earlier, they might incorporate multiple practices. So they might want, to do like 10 rituals from all these different things, and sometimes that's just, too much. So again, having that conversation, and if you feel like it's too much, then I think we can say that to them, just because a lot of times they don't know. They think by adding a million things makes it more exciting for the guests, but actually simple sometimes is better, because what you say about the couple, about how they met, what they're bringing together to bring out to the world is way more, to me, more fascinating to the guests that are there to support them than sometimes going through the bells and whistles, as I call them, respectfully. Respectfully, being the interfaith person that I am. All right, and then I just heard, I didn't know about duns, but duns are literally people that are just done with any form of faith, religion, and a lot of people are done right now. There's more nuns. I looked at the statistics, and there's more nuns than there are anything right now. And nuns are pretty much opposed to any form of indoctrinated faith or religious practice. They prefer humanist, and I know there's some seasoned people here, but humanist is great because it's really about the connection. It's about the relationship. And that could be a relationship to many things. So they may not call it spiritual, but it is, in many times, in many situations, it's a sacred conversation of, why are we here? I'm choosing you. Journey. You're going to witness many versions of me, and I'm willing to let you do that. That's sacred. It's not often that we get to meet a person that we'd actually be willing to do that with. So I just remind all of my couples, regardless of how they feel in that moment, that it's a big decision. And so that unto itself is sacred. And the word ritual can also trigger people. So again, we are ritualized, humans. We wake up at a certain time, we do a certain thing, that's all ritual. So I think if that's explained in our, I guess when we're first initially introducing our process, that's just a word. And what we attach to the meaning of words is oftentimes based off of either something that was said to us or something that we believe. So just working through our own biases, and even our couples or their family, depending on how much influence the in-laws will have on the actual ceremony, because that's a whole other chapter. Yes, relationships. Okay. So here's some helpful questions, and excuse me for those that you have the experience, but I'll go over what I feel has been very helpful before working with these couples. So first thing is, I like to know if they're on the same page. Are they totally thinking different things, or do they have, a common thing they want to do? So what do you envision for your ceremony? That's the first question, especially when I have like an Asian, say I'll have an Asian groom and a Hispanic, a Latina bride. So do they agree on certain, rituals or certain things? Do they have to incorporate a bow in the ceremony? Because in the Asian culture, that's very common. So I always want to know what their expectations are. Second question I ask is, are there any cultural elements or religious rituals that you wish to include in the ceremony? The third question is, do you have support from your families? If not, how can I best support you through this process? So I'm going to stay on that for a second. I have found that after officiating, the number kind of freaks me out when I say it, but around 3,000 ceremonies. Yeah. Which I'm like, that's amazing when you think about like all the people that you can join. Is it possible to do that? But yes, I looked at the number the other day. A lot of us need support. A lot of us need to know that there is a person that we could go to, we're getting married, we're freaked out, that we can just know all of our yucky, ugly stuff and not care. Like, where it's not going to be a consequence because you're really mad at your groom to be because he's whatever. Like, just to have that safe space. And I realized after about 7 years, I would say 7 years in, I'm 13 years in now, that I want to be that person. I want to be that safe space. And so it was in these unions, especially with my LGBTQ couples, and that's later, I'll talk about that, that I just want to be a safe space. And that safe space can oftentimes mean that you charge, like it doesn't have to be free. You can have a boundary with what safe space looks like for you. I'll throw in a few like phone calls. Sure, you could call me, but if it gets to the point where I become auntie and I'm like, all of a sudden helping them plan everything, that's when I say, well, it's great. Why don't we book a session? And then you could charge, but there's nothing more valuable to me than letting people know that you're there for them, especially because they don't think that you are. They think you're just like a hired person, and oftentimes we're at the bottom of the list. I know you probably went through, you already, Bethel mentioned that. We are. I mean, sometimes it's like the last person, because if a person is looking for a priest or a rabbi, it's probably the same person that either baptized them or, did their bar mitzvah. So they're not looking for us. They're looking for us to be the alternative to that. And so they forget. They're like, photographer, we need to have the most beautiful venue. And then they look and they're, oh my gosh, honey, we forgot to get the person who's marrying us. Like, hello. I can't. And now the trend, because of the pandemic, there's been a huge shift in who's going to marry us. And a lot of times I'm like the break glass in case of emergency clergy person now, because your aunt was supposed to marry you, but then changed her mind like a week ago. So there's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of, we wanted our friend to marry us, but now we changed our minds. Are you available next week? So where's our boundary with that, right? Like at a certain point, I would get to a place, especially now, I would say it's not, I don't even recognize my business compared to before the pandemic. It's just a very different culture. But they think we're just a last minute choice. And if we allow that, then that's what we become. And how many live in the city? Are you primarily focused on serving New York City area? Yeah, so you'll find that we're a tourist attraction. And it's great. That's why my number is so high. I didn't know that this was a destination. Like, who knew that Rockefeller Center would give me 20 weddings in December of 2010? You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know, but I was like, sure. They're the most inconvenient ceremonies ever. They're cold and they're crowded, like super crowded. So if you are thinking about basing yourself here in the boroughs, think about what that looks like for you, because I had no idea. I was raising my kids, and I just wanted a job where I could only be gone like 2 or 3 hours and then run back home, because I didn't want to be tied to, many, many hours away. And my eldest son is autistic, and he was the one that actually made me question my faith. It was a faith experience raising a young child who had no verbal skills whatsoever, and this was my first child. He was 99, and I remember my friend Jennifer said, and my daughter was born right after him, and she said, come to my Buddhist meeting at my house, you'll love it. And so I went, and then she said, we're having the big one in Union Square downtown. We do it once a month, and it's everyone just comes together and we chant. So we go to the Buddhist center. I'm nervous because my son's restless, and we sit down, and everybody's chanting. I don't know if you're familiar with the Tina Turner story, but Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. So Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is basically the sound of creation in this particular faith, and they do it over and over and over again. And I'm turning, and my son is chanting. And he only said the word cookie up until that point. So I was just like, okay, what is happening? And then we get home and he's chanting. I'm like, what is happening? So it sort of opened my mind to say, okay, there is way more to this story than I'm even paying attention to. I'm just like going through the motions. I'm a musician. I was doing weddings for 15 years as a musician to just raise those little guys. And so when he started doing that at 9 years old, that's when I went to the new seminary. And it wasn't because I thought it was religion that was the reason. It was more like, I want to know more. Like, I want to know what is life? What is the meaning of why we're here? And honestly, even after the program, I found a community of people that just want this world to be better. And that's really what I got more from that community than an answer, because that answer is endless, that we could be asking those questions forever. So not to get off on a tangent, but that's really what brought me to my spiritual path, was my son. And so when I realized that when we're sitting and holding space for families, that we don't know what they're going through. We don't know all this pressure that they might be feeling. And maybe they don't want to have any religion or any readings or anything at all, but it would be horrible enough that they're just doing it in a venue as opposed to a house of worship. So sometimes, like Bethel said, throw in God, or, say the words bless, say something like that, and that will oftentimes really help grandma feel like, okay, at least you said bless. And and a lot of times I'm not doing a religious ceremony, but I'm doing a spiritual ceremony. I do a lot of religious ceremonies off site, I would say. Like, a lot of times I'll baptize babies and work in that realm, but I'm doing it with pure reverence, and I know that I'm asked to be with this child for a reason. So I'm not, trying to say that being clergy is why you do a religious ceremony. It's more like who's drawn to us, right? We grow our garden, and then the people come. So the last question here is, have you thought about how you will navigate holidays or address family matters going forward? So this is also where I realized 7 years ago that I actually want to also do preparation. So I'm not doing a talk on premarital stuff right now, but that is where I've landed. And I created a program for all the couples are like, well, we don't need to do premarital sessions. We're not religious, or, we've been together 14 years. What do we need to know? So I actually created something where, okay, fine, you don't want me to be there, then you could go on my program and do it. Because if there's stuff there that you have not been able to really talk through, the last thing you want is for it to come up after you're married. And a lot of times, we hold in things until maybe 6 months or a year into marriage. That's when our stuff, starts to come up. So I think that if any of you are interested in premarital counseling, there are some really great programs where you could get a training, get a certificate. But again, that's all the dialogue around safe space, creating that safe space and being a resource. Okay, so I'm going a little bit into rituals and ideas of what you can do with multi-faith or more multicultural. So in the Filipino and Spanish culture, there is a ritual called the lazo and the aras. The lazo is a lasso. It's beautiful. It's shaped like an infinity symbol, and it represents that they will, be together forever. And so in the Filipino culture, they have what they call sponsors, and they will appoint almost like godparents to come up and sit on their shoulders. Usually it's done either before or after the vows or the rings. So a lot of times the Filipino couples that I marry want this. Whether or not they have Bible verses or not, sometimes no. Sometimes it's just this ritual. Very similar to the East Indian, where they do the, what's the word? Words are leaving me. Yeah, thank you. So they have the flower garland. And once, I didn't know this story, but once you put the flower garland on, you're married. So there doesn't need to be a paper or anything else. You can do nothing else but just the flower garland, and that's their marriage. That's the official vow, which comes from a really long, beautiful story in their spiritual book. So the Hispanic culture, the aras are the coins. So, back in the day, it was transactional. Marriage was business, which sometimes I think it still is. But it was literally transactional. So they had the coins, and each coin represented a different virtue. And so what they do is they exchange the coin in the ceremony. That's more, I think, Spanish than Filipino. But just so you know, it's both. Oh, she does a lot of coins of both. I've only done them with my Spanish couples. Yes. San Diego has a huge Filipino community. Yes. So then also in their traditional Catholic ceremony for the Filipino and the Spanish, that is all incorporated in their Catholic ceremony. So let's just say they don't want the Catholic part, but they want the ritual part. These are the things that you might want to suggest if sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they haven't discussed it with their family. And then for the Asian and East Asian cultures, I have so much fun with my Hindu-ish ceremonies. They have a ton of symbols and rituals representing many different things. And that's usually a 4-day, or 7-day ceremony. So what do we do in a half an hour, right? What does that look like? So oftentimes what I did was I just went and I did a ton of research, and I started, at that time, I started just printing out what each one meant. And so this way, if I was approached about it, I could make a suggestion and I sound like I know something about it, right? Again, look at your own comfort level. If someone was to approach you and say, oh, we're Hindu, can you do this? You have to pray to Lord Ganesh. At the beginning of every Indian ceremony, Lord Ganesh is the keeper of sacred space. So eliminates all obstacles. I pray to Ganesh all the time because if anything, they know that if Ganesh blessed it, then they're good forever. And so having that comfort level of being able to do that for them as well. In the Japanese and Chinese, I believe they also sometimes do what they call a tea ceremony. That's to introduce the families, the bride to the other family. So a lot of times they do that the day before or even before the actual wedding. I was asked recently to do it during the ceremony. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that look like for you? Because you're going to have all these guests here. We're in a venue. It's not a place where you just have a ton of time to do stuff. A lot of times the venue gives you an hour, but half of that hour is just people coming in and getting settled. So you really just have like half an hour. So again, it's about their expectations. And then we come back with, well, this is what I have found has worked really well. So this way you're the authority. And they might say they want to do something, but if it seems like it's unreasonable, you can say to them, how can we make it shorter, or can you do the longer one before that day? There's also Chinese red thread symbolism, which I just learned that the belief is that we're born with a red thread connected to our other person. And that when we finally find them, that, we have that red thread. So there's There's a ceremony you could do inside the wedding. There's a reading that you could do talking about that we're all born connected, and that you found the person on the other side of your red thread. Also, the Buddhist vows are more traditional. If you do an alternative multi-faith, the vows are more it's about collective participation in how you are in the world as a couple. It's service. So instead of them vowing to each other, they're as a couple vowing to the world, vowing to the family, vowing to the sacredness of union. And so the vows are different. It's not, I vow to you, I promise you. It's more like we promise to be of service, to do good things in the community. And so that's how you could reword some of the vows if it's a Buddhist or Buddhist-ish ceremony. Again, research, because you're going to know who you are, what your voice is as that person, because we're all different, and the things that resonate, we could do the same ceremony and be totally different, just because we bring our individual magical self to that scenario. Then Middle Eastern, I love the Persian. So the Persian is similar, Middle Eastern, very similar to the Hindu, where the table is just like humongous, and they'll have all sorts of things that represent all different aspects of bringing and what is meant for the marriage. I remember very vividly the sugar shake ceremony. Okay, so I love this. So they take a veil and they put it over the bride. She sits in a chair, and all of the women that are married in the family come and dance around her, and they shake sugar over her head to symbolize the sweetness of life. And they bring their joy as the married member of the family, the female, to her in that ritual. It's beautiful. And so a lot of times, again, we're being educated, but we're also being blessed by seeing the culture come even into, they may be so far away from where their family's originally from and, where their history comes from, but yet they can bring it into, say, a venue in Brooklyn, or, they can all of a sudden, just bring another world to a space. And that's what we do. We create portals, we create the magical circle just by our intention of being there for that family, for those families. Okay. So Jewish and Muslim populations, very, very common in Middle Eastern cultural families as well. So again, it's a mix match, right? You get a menu. If it's an Asian bride and a Persian husband, sometimes the one family won't have as much need for things as another one. So then you have to just weigh it and see what feels comfortable for both of them. Okay, and so here's for European, they do the hand fasting, and that's when in that movie, yeah, so basically the idea is that you tie your wrists or your hands together, that's your engagement. And if you're still together a year later, then you're married. And so they like to incorporate a lot of the hand fasting rituals into the ceremony. I did a Polish wedding where they also bless the bread, and there's a salt ritual. They cut the bread and they give that to the family. 5 minutes? Oh goodness. Okay, so guess what? I have to move on from this. I got carried away. Anyway, so you'll get my slides. But this is really important to me, so I need to touch on this. I need to tell a really quick story. So I was raised around mostly gay male couples. They were my uncles. All my mom's best friends were gay male couples. And my mom passed away before I was ordained, but she wrote my reference letter. So I didn't want to officiate weddings. I was like, no, that's not me. I've been singing and witnessing drunk weddings for 12, 15 years. But my friend, she asked me to marry. It's many of us had a friend. But in any case, that next year, I had just had my third child. And I just felt this need to put up like a little template website. And so I did. And then I got hired by a straight couple, but I didn't know that their date was going to be the day that equality passed here in New York City. Now, the weird thing is that this is how I knew, and this is why I say I'm very spiritual. That date was the day that it passed. So, of course, there was like flags and balloons everywhere, all over the city. But I didn't know that the groom's uncle was the senator that actually passed it. Okay, so not only was I like shaking and like crying and all of the above, they sent me the photos of the ceremony, and I looked exactly like my mother. And I was like, Francine, I know you sent me to say yes to do this. And so from that day on, I said, I don't care where I am, what I'm doing. If you have a right to love and I can be the one to say yes to you, then I'm doing it. So I did probably, that's why my number's so high. I would show up in the middle of the night. I didn't care where I was. I did so many gay weddings because I just knew that it's about being able to love who you love, no matter what, as far as I feel. And if you don't feel that way, it's okay. Then don't marry them. It's like we all have choices and we know what our purpose is when we are true to ourselves. We don't do it for the money. It's not about that. It's about service to humanity. And so that's really what brought me to this. So I'll quickly, since I have 5 minutes. This is Bo and Steven. They were together 35 years. Okay. Okay, so Bo and Steven, okay, wait. Oh my gosh, they're the best. They met on Broadway. They were performing. They were together 35 years, and they cried like nobody's business. And I cried, and I'm going to cry right now. But in any case, they were scared. They were so scared. But when we did it, they cried. I sang as they walked down the aisle. It was just the craziest, best gay wedding ever. I wish I had, really seriously done a documentary on them. And they still send me birthday cards, and they live in Dallas. Here's their friends. Oh my gosh, you must tell them. Oh my gosh. So, of course, this was like the best day ever. And this was probably my second wedding ever. So we don't know why, but just go with it and feel and allow the path to show you where to go and trust it, because again, just be true to who you are, no matter what. So very quickly, just questions, and you'll get these slides. Pronouns, oh my gosh, pronouns. They, him, he, all of it. So the most complicated wedding I did was 2 weeks ago. I had a queer, and they call themselves queer, but literally it was a person who's in transition, as a trans, and I'd never married a trans before, but they were in a dress with a beard, and they wanted to be a they, and then their partner was dressed as a male. So I had to refer to him as he and the other one as they, and it was very confusing. So again, if you're not comfortable, don't do it. But again, if you're curious, if it's something you want to explore, you think about, then that's what I advise you to do. But pronouns are huge right now, even for people that are not trans or any of that. Are there any sensitive issues with the family, which most of the time there is? Again, safe space, I go back to that. And do they prefer spiritual or civil? Civil is just no mention of God. That's all simple. Humanist, no mention of God. Spiritual can be a bless word. It doesn't always have to be a God word. Do they need any additional support? And how would they prefer to be announced? So I now pronounce you married. I use that a lot. You may seal your promises with a kiss. You don't have to mention bride, bride, groom, groom. Or I now pronounce you wife and wife, husband and husband. What else is here? Oh, okay, good. I'm at the end. Yay, I made it. So I have many titles, but for this, I am an interfaith minister, doctor of ministry. I'm also a premarital coach, founder of Common Ground Ceremonies here in New York City, 13 years, and founder of what I'm now calling the Marriage Success Blueprint program. I'm still in the works. It's a pilot, but it's there. And I use Smith as the love smith because I told you earlier, you go to the locksmith to fix your lock, so you go to the lovesmith to fix your love. It's kind of silly, cheesy, but it works. And then I'm also proudly the associate director for the very same school that I was ordained. So if you ever think about deeper dive into faith, it doesn't conflict with anything you're doing here. It's just, to me, it's not about religion as much as it's about sensitivity and education to have, because interfaith is not a religion, it's a dialogue. And that's what the UN has tried to do, but there's not enough people out here really doing the research and the work to understand that it's about finding common ground that will make everything better for us, and not always look at what divides us. And then I'm also the director for spiritual coaching at the new Seminary as well. So yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. You can, ask questions. I have no time for questions. Later. Okay, perfect. So just write down any questions you have for me. And if we don't answer them today, I'm a resource if you want to reach out. Thank you.